why human suffering is so prevalent, why our attempts to escape it often backfire. This video will offer some fresh perspectives on those inner struggles you might be facing.
Our guide is the book Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life, which explores how to shift from battling your inner critic to fully engaging with life using a method called acceptance and commitment therapy.
The book starts off with a bit of a reality check. It states that happiness isn't our natural default setting. It gets into some heavy topics like the prevalence of suicide and mental health struggles, plus those universal challenges we face in relationships, work, and finding purpose.
It kind of makes you wonder, is it actually abnormal to not experience psychological pain?
It's a powerful question, isn't it? The book challenges the pervasive idea that we should be striving for constant happiness. Instead, it normalizes struggle as part of the human experience, even in seemingly successful lives.
And it's not just anecdotal. The book provides some startling statistics. Like, did you know you have a 50-50 chance of experiencing suicidal thoughts for at least 2 weeks in your lifetime?
It's wild how common that is, yet we rarely talk about it openly. It really highlights the need for a new approach to dealing with these internal struggles.
The book uses this great metaphor of quicksand. The more we struggle to escape psychological pain, the deeper we sink.
Which seems counterintuitive, right? Our instinct is to fight our way out of a problem, but with psychological pain, our usual methods can actually make things worse.
Exactly. Think about a time you try to force yourself to not feel anxious or sad. Did it work? Probably not.
Nope, definitely not my area of expertise. So, what's going on there?
Well, ACT suggests our minds are kind of playing tricks on us. We are wired to solve external problems, avoid danger, seek shelter, that kind of thing. But when we apply that same logic to our inner world, it just doesn't work the same way.
Okay, so how do we escape this mental quicksand?
The book says ACT offers a different approach with 3 main steps: mindfulness, acceptance, and values.
Let's start with mindfulness.
This isn't about emptying your mind, but more about observing your thoughts and feelings without judgment, kind of like watching clouds drift by.
So instead of getting swept away by that wave of anxiety, you're acknowledging it's there without letting it take over.
Precisely. The book offers this helpful analogy. Imagine your thoughts as lenses you are constantly looking through. Mindfulness helps you step back and see those lenses rather than being controlled by them.
Oh, I like that. So it's like suddenly you realize, wait, I'm looking at this situation through a fear of failure lens. No wonder everything seems so scary.
Exactly. And that awareness is a game changer because it leads to the next step, acceptance.
So acceptance in this context doesn't mean giving up. It's more about making room for those difficult emotions instead of constantly battling them.
You got it. It's about recognizing that pain is inevitable, but suffering comes from resisting that pain.
That's a really important distinction. Yeah, so instead of asking, how do I get rid of this feeling? We're asking, how can I make space for this feeling and still move forward?
And that brings us to the 3rd step, values. What do you truly want your life to stand for?
Values become your compass, guiding you even when emotions are turbulent or external pressures try to steer you off course.
The book has this powerful visualization exercise where you imagine your own funeral. It asks, what would you want people to say about you? Kind of intense, but it really forces you to confront what truly matters.
It's a powerful way to connect with your deepest values and start thinking about the legacy you want to leave behind.
And here's where things get really interesting. The book emphasizes that values aren't goals.
What's the difference? Aren't they kind of the same thing?
Not quite. Goals can be achieved, but values are more like directions. So let's say a loving relationship is a value. It's not a destination you arrive at. It's an ongoing direction. You could always be more loving, even when things get tough.
That's a really helpful way to think about it. So it's not about reaching some perfect state of always being loving, but about continually choosing actions that align with that value.
Exactly. While values can be perfect, our behavior might need some work.
The idea isn't to beat ourselves up for not always living perfectly aligned with our values, but to use that awareness to guide our actions. So it's more about progress than perfection.
But how do we actually put these values into action? The book talks about practical tools, right?
Right. It suggests starting with a goals worksheet. Take those values you've identified and break them down into achievable steps.
So, if connecting with friends is a value, a short term goal could be calling someone you haven't spoken to in a while.
Makes sense.
Yeah, you are making those values tangible. But it's also important to acknowledge that barriers will inevitably arise. These could be practical obstacles, but more importantly, those internal barriers we've been talking about, the thoughts, feelings, and urges that try to hold us back.
And the key here is we don't get over these barriers. We get with them, right?
Exactly. Acceptance is crucial for moving forward, even when it's uncomfortable.
The book calls this pattern smashing. It's about identifying those negative habits and trying to do the opposite.
So, if your pattern is to isolate yourself when you are feeling down, a pattern smashing move would be to reach out to a friend, even if it feels counterintuitive in the moment.
You got it. It's about disrupting those automatic responses and creating new, more empowering patterns.
And through all of this, the book emphasizes the importance of keeping commitments, even small ones. It's about building trust in ourselves and strengthening that commitment muscle.
Absolutely. Making and keeping small promises to yourself, even seemingly trivial ones, reinforces that you're capable of moving in the direction of your values. It's like building momentum.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from understanding values to setting goals to taking action. It's about creating this upward spiral of growth.
What really stands out to you from all of this?
What's really resonated with me is this idea of shifting our focus from eliminating pain to living a values driven life. Instead of constantly trying to avoid or escape difficult emotions, we are learning to coexist with them while still moving in the direction we want to go.
Yeah, trying to eliminate pain entirely is exhausting. And honestly, probably impossible. It's like chasing a mirage.
And the book gets into this in the chapter on understanding values. It emphasizes that values are chosen life directions, not destinations.
So it's not about reaching a state of, I'm finally free from anxiety, but rather, how can I live a courageous life even when anxiety is present?
The book uses this metaphor of a bus. Your life is the bus, and your thoughts, feelings, and memories are the passengers. Instead of trying to kick off the unwanted passengers, ACT is about learning to coexist with them while still steering the bus in the direction you want to go.
That's such a helpful visual. We all have those passengers, right? The anxiety passenger, the self doubt passenger, the fear of failure passenger. Sometimes it feels like they're taking up all the seats.
Absolutely. And the book cleverly illustrates that choosing a value is an act of pure choice. It's about deciding what truly matters to you, regardless of your mind's chatter.
So, how do we uncover these values? We talked about that funeral visualization, which seemed pretty intense.
It's incredibly insightful though. It definitely brings up deep emotions. You visualize your own funeral and imagine what you'd want people to say about you and the life you lived.
I can see how that would really force you to confront what truly matters.
It does. The book guides you to write two eulogies. One is based on your current path, perhaps dominated by struggles or things you are trying to avoid. The other reflects the life lived in alignment with your values. The contrast can be pretty eye-opening.
Then you write your own epitaph, right? That inscription you'd want on your tombstone. It's like boiling down your values to their essence.
Exactly. It connects you to your deepest desire and lays the groundwork for translating those values into action. Because values without action are just nice ideas, right?
It's like that saying, well-behaved people rarely make history. We have to actually do something with these values.
You said it. The book outlines a four-part process for moving from values to committed action. Clarifying your values, developing goals, taking actions, and addressing internal barriers.
It's a cycle that starts with getting clear on what matters to you. Then you create goals that move you in that direction.
It's about setting both long-term and short-term goals, creating a roadmap for your journey.
But the book also emphasizes that goals should be realistic, right?
Yes, it's about setting yourself up for success with workable and obtainable goals, not grandiose fantasies. Small steps lead to big change.
So it's not about aiming to become a world-famous musician, but maybe practicing guitar for 30 minutes every day.
Exactly. It's about breaking down those larger aspirations into manageable steps, focusing on actions you can actually control.
But then, of course, those barriers inevitably pop up. Life happens. So how do we deal with those internal barriers, the thoughts, feelings, and urges that try to hold us back from taking action?
ACT suggests we don't get over those barriers, we get wisdom. It's about making space for the discomfort using mindfulness, acceptance, and diffusion techniques while still taking action.
So it's like saying, okay, fear, I see you, I feel you, but I'm going to do this anyway.
You got it. The book also provides strategies for pattern smashing, breaking free from ingrained self-defeating patterns.
Okay, give me an example of that. Let's say someone struggles with procrastination. How could they use pattern smashing to address that?
Great question. Let's say their pattern is to avoid tasks that feel overwhelming by scrolling through social media. A pattern smashing action could be setting a timer for 15 minutes and working on a task before allowing themselves any social media time.
That makes sense. It's like hacking your own brain.
And the book also emphasizes those small commitments. It's not about making huge sweeping changes overnight, but about proving to yourself you can follow through even in small ways.
Absolutely. And those small commitments can create a ripple effect, like making your bed every morning might seem insignificant, but it reinforces that you're capable of doing what you say you're going to do.
So we've talked about understanding values, setting realistic goals, taking actions, and addressing those internal barriers. It's a pretty comprehensive framework for personal growth, but it's not a linear process, is it? We are going to mess up, fall back into old patterns. How do we deal with that?
You're right. It's a process, not a destination. And the book has a great section on dealing with guilt and forgiveness. It's natural to feel guilty over past choices or wasted time.
That if only I had known then what I know now feeling can be brutal.
But the book encourages us to be kind to ourselves and acknowledge that we did the best we could with the knowledge we had at the time.
It's not about letting ourselves off the hook, but about learning from those experiences and moving forward.
Exactly. It's about remembering that we always have the power to choose, to course correct, to start anew. It's never too late to step onto that path of acceptance, mindfulness, and committed action.
It's about getting out of our minds and into our lives, embracing the messiness and beauty of it all.
And I think that's what's so empowering about ACT. It's not about achieving some idealized state of perfection, but about living a rich, meaningful life, even amidst the challenges.
And it all boils down to choice, doesn't it? At every moment, we have a choice.
Absolutely. The book uses this powerful imagery of a fork in the road. We can choose the familiar path of avoidance and control or the less traveled path of acceptance and commitment.
And that path of acceptance doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. It might even feel harder in some ways.
It's a different kind of hard. It's the hard that comes with growth, with vulnerability, with truly living.
It's the heart that leads to a life that is full, vibrant, and ultimately meaningful.
But it's also important to remember we're not alone on this journey. The book talks a lot about the power of sharing, connecting with others, seeking support.
Absolutely. There's strength in vulnerability and power in acknowledging that we are all in this together. It's okay to ask for help, to lean on others, to allow ourselves to be supported.
That's a really important message, especially in a world that often pressures us to present this perfect facade. It's about giving ourselves permission to be human, to embrace the full spectrum of our experiences.
So what does this all mean?
I think the biggest takeaway is this idea of psychological flexibility. It's this ability to adapt and respond to life's challenges in a way that aligns with our values, even when anxiety, fear, or any other difficult emotion pops up.
So instead of letting fear dictate our actions, we acknowledge it, make space for it, and then make a conscious choice to act in a way that reflects what truly matters to us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our minds are going to do what minds do. They're going to worry. They're going to try to protect us. They're going to throw all sorts of what-if scenarios.
Our minds are like that overprotective friend who's constantly warning us about potential dangers.
And while those warnings can be helpful sometimes, if we let them rule our lives, we end up missing out on so much. We get stuck in that what-if loop and end up paralyzed by fear.
And that's where psychological flexibility comes in. It's about developing the skills to step back from those thoughts, to observe them without judgment, and to choose a different course of action.
So it's not about silencing those worried thoughts, but about not letting them be the sole driver of our decisions.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that we have a choice. We can choose to buy into that thoughts and let them control us. Or we can choose to act in accordance with our values, even when it feels uncomfortable.
And that choice, that act of choosing, is where our power lies.
Beautifully said. It's not about reaching some final destination. It's about the journey, about embracing each step along the way.
May your journey be filled with meaning, purpose, and a whole lot of psychological flexibility.